Welcome to another episode of Data Gurus. I'm so excited to welcome CEO and co-founder of Morning Consult, Michael Ramlet.
Thank
Welcome,
you for
Michael.
having me. Excited to be here.
Excited to be here. Are all those books behind you real?
They are real. Yeah, it's not a Zoom background. They're
Oh,
they're like Morning Consult. We try to cover a broad representative sample, and it says a broad representative sample history. And one top right, I think, is mostly U.S. history. Bottom right is world history. Bottom left is actually more economic history, and top left is business company history.
that's
So all of our
amazing.
all of our initiatives internally at Morning Consult have some very nerdy code names and tend to stress
From the yeah,
information why that code name was chosen.
I love it. I love it. I love it that books are still part of your life. I know a lot of people have switched to uh virtual ebooks, I should say.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, listen, I always am so curious to understand people's journeys up to this point in their career, and I'd love for you just to share a little bit of your journey, how you got to this point in your career.
Yeah, so our entrepreneurial journey is very much reflective of kind of that, we're focused on solving a problem
Yeah.
and it kind of being a series of problems that led to what became Morning Consult. It actually predates the kind of media platform where all the public content that folks see. It actually dates back to when I thought I was going to do a PhD in economics. And so
Mhm.
I created our original newsletter as a way to get my thesis advisor, and he was a prominent economist and kind of threw his Rolodex on it. And so that was how sort of the media distribution platform started. And then one of my co-founders did do his PhD work at Stanford, and he was showing me his dissertation and some of the things that were focused on where online methods need to go from a quality standpoint. And then we convinced our other co-founder to forego his U Chicago PhD program, and he had a background in computer science. And so, kind of along the way, I was sort of solving these different problems of the first is sort of quality information, covering
Right.
this intersection of Wall Street, business strategy, policy, and politics. That morphed into sort of recognizing that there was really underwhelming real time data that
Mhm.
informed these sectors. And so that sort of led to the original sort of focus on surveys. And that's where Kyle's background at Stanford was very much focused on survey methodology. And I think what we kept coming back to was this underlying issue of uh, there wasn't real-time information on what people think about a lot of these big issues,
Mhm.
even within the largest companies, within hedge funds, within political campaigns. It was shocking how slow the data information flow was. And in part, it was because it was just really, I think, expensive to do that type of
Sure.
daily. And then furthermore, I think what we discovered is because people weren't going daily, they didn't have line of sight on the quality
Mm.
issue underneath it. And so I think we started with a lot of these sort of problems that then informed the mission, which was we wanted to provide real time information on what people think to inform better decisions from business, financial, government leaders. And that was, it was pretty simple. We had
How long
30K.
ago was that
That
when you
was
had that
out of
idea?
it. I quit my job in October of 2013. I don't
Okay.
consider that the start of the business. Kyle was actually still technically a Dartmouth professor. Uh,
Okay.
I consider the start of the business January 1 of 2014, which is when we had our first paid employee. And it was none of the co-founders because now we were responsible for
Right, for somebody
company's
else's
livelihood.
salary.
Like it wasn't, we had made the choice to quit our
Yes.
job.
Right.
But that's how it really kind of led to January 2014. We started in a row home in Eastern Market in Washington, DC. One of our employees lived in the house to keep it zone residential. And we quickly outgrew the house and had to find an office, I think, less than 6 months later.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And your background, I mean, you studied economics, right? Undergrad and
Yeah,
grad.
I thought I was gonna do a background in kind of business and public policy that sort of focus on the intersection of economics, and a
Yeah.
lot of that came into pricing theory. And so, Kyle and I talked a lot about both how inefficient the pricing
Mm,
was in Alex in the survey market research industry and the
right.
sample space, but then also the sort of lack of line of sight to quality. So you have these big asymmetric information gaps. And I think that's the thing that still astounds us today is that the industry can still get better across the continuum in
Right.
terms of addressing those issues.
So when you started, you talked about, officially it's 2014, and at that time you were just shocked about how long the cycle was to get information to key stakeholders. Thinking back at that time, what was your estimated like time, uh, from inception to delivery of insights?
Yes, this is where I kinda say it's like a series of problems that has always sort of
Right,
been motivating, but followed the underlying mission. I mean, it was amazing to us, the leg time to program a survey, the leg
right.
time to, field the survey and the in-field monitoring, and so every one of those points in the supply chain, we were obsessed about either automating or building systems around. And so I think from our standpoint, and probably was the key factor in the early days of Morning Consult, where we were obsessed about the supply chain. Like, if you asked any of the major panel company CEOs, we really came out of nowhere.
Right.
I think from our standpoint, it was this idea that we could consistently control for better quality if we owned each step. But every
Yes.
time that we made those investments, we also found that it would streamline the cost. And
Yeah.
so by being able to both have a technology base that achieved the highest quality interview, we were at the same time also building the most efficient interview cost structure.
Cool. Um, let's talk about, the people that buy your information, the people
Yeah.
that need this real-time insights. Who are some of kind of your target audiences when you think about as you know, who basically purchase Morning Consult?
Yeah, so it's obviously gone a long ways from being $30,000 in angel capital in a Rome and Eastern market today, well over hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. We work with about a quarter of the global 2000 companies, so
Nice.
incredible diversity across sectors. I think what makes us unique in the industry is we're also incredibly diverse across functions. So
Yep.
it's not just the insights buyer, it's also or marketing or comms, it's also government affairs, public
Mhm.
affairs, the strategy function, the finance function, in large part because I think we took a pretty broad view to what is survey research.
Mhm.
A lot of folks think about it in the context of like political polling, or they might think about it in the context of like corporate market research. The majority of economic data that's used is actually survey based. And that was also an area where I think we were keenly interested in things like consumer confidence, consumer spending,
Right.
labor force participation. And so what it meant was that that could serve a more diverse corporate base.
Mhm.
But then our fastest growing client base right now actually is in professional services and financial services. So we work with most of the large global management consulting firms,
Nice.
communications firms, advertising firms, and then the majority of the world's central banks rely on the data. Work with the World Bank, the IMF. It is astounding to us the degree to which you're expecting policymakers like the Fed to make decisions, and for years they were relying on the same technology that was used in the 40s. And
Yep.
so for us, like the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index is a good example. We do, instead of 600 interviews once a month in the 3 week reporting leg, we do over 6,000 a day on those questions in the United States.
Incredible.
And then Michigan's only in the US. We do a daily 24,000 interviews then in 42 international markets. So it's great because every day when we wake up, we know we're going to do at least 30,000 interviews. This year we'll do about 20 million total interviews. But I think that dynamic, it makes it really interesting and exciting to wake up every day because you just don't know what kind of problem you're going to work on.
Yeah, and when you first started and kind of evangelized this need, I mean, obviously the need was there and you got clients to buy into it. But did you find resistance in terms of people buying into the
I
concept?
don't think I'm gonna be on the Christmas card list for Kantar, Ipsos, or anybody anytime soon in the industry. I think from our standpoint, we try to actually keep a pretty low profile for the
Yeah.
first years.
Yes.
I don't think we wanted to necessarily share as much about the technology because I think we were pretty shocked that no one was investing the way they should have on the supply chain. And I
Yeah.
think what we realize now is we need a better job of articulating how these investments improve the overall industry and the quality of sample and how you can have confidence in the value of the sample. I think recognizing too the value of survey research data for
Mm,
technology applications is really exciting. I mean, most of the hedge funds we work with, they're using this for artificial intelligence applications for quantitative trading. Like
mm.
there's such a huge value in the underlying data asset that is survey research data.
Yeah.
We need to think about it creatively and in an innovative manner about where the future of the industry is going. So I think we felt it was important to, long time follower of the
Yeah.
podcast, like to come on places like Data Gurus and talk about,
Yes.
hey, this is really exciting. I mean, Andreessen wrote the note a few weeks ago, like, it's always funny when venture capital sort of like rediscovers market research, like, wow, this is a really large,
Really cool. Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, it's incredibly large, but
Mm.
it requires both kind of domain expertise as well as an understanding that technology and the tech stack has to change. And so I think from our standpoint, that was what was so exciting about the opportunity is like we just saw this chance to go in and make these technology investments. And then over time, the data asset grew. And so then you start to think about what artificial intelligence can do to open up, petabytes of survey data.
Right. Let me ask you this. I mean, obviously, we've been talking as an industry about data quality. You've had this thesis of
Yeah.
really, improving, optimizing the supply chain, reliant on survey research and respondents. What's your thesis on data quality today? Is it the same? Is it different? Like, give me a perspective from your point of view. I know you guys buy a ton of
I think
sample.
everyone should stop releasing press releases claiming all kinds of things about quality. Like, I think the realization is that you have to own the quality, and that means you have to own as much of that supply chain and have as much validation and security protocols in place with suppliers. So you think about
Yeah.
this, we're probably the world's largest end buyer of sample because
Right.
we're collecting that data, for instance, on the state economy that's being shared with central banks. So we have this
Yes.
intense focus on high quality outcomes because, it's our name on the door when we're sending it to the
Right.
federal. And so what we cared about was that ability to directly connect with panels. So we had gone from a world in the beginning where we were on the exchanges. Today,
Yep.
we 5 years ago we made the decision we're going to build our own private exchange.
Mhm.
And because we were such a large buyer, I think it was both really attractive to the sample suppliers that they could directly connect with us. There was no transaction fees. And then you could count on us. We were daily demand. So whether it was a
Right.
holiday or it was like peak like demand season, like we were gonna go no matter what every day. And so what ended up happening was we could start to open up a lot of that information. So for
Mm.
instance, like we pass back to every single supplier. It's kind of
Mhm.
like run our own hedge fund in that way. Here's the exact pricing by each substrata. So if in every one of those countries, we have a representative sample by age, income, ethnicity, education, gender, region of the country, we're actually sharing back with those suppliers. Here's what the average price is for each of those substrata every hour in every market everywhere in the world. And so that way they can make more informed decisions around where they want to recruit panelists, where they
Yep.
want to supply it. That was one part of it was all right, the supply chain side. Then it was we're gonna own everything about the in-survey attentiveness pieces and we're gonna
Okay.
build fingerprinting in-house. And then what became more important is and that's where I think the industry has sort of been stuck is
Mm.
focusing. Okay, what is the panel mix like? One thing I'll tell you, panel blend doesn't exist. I
Mm.
like if I could root out one fallacy of like the industry is that
Yes.
you get no protection from panel blend. I think I've shown you privately, like with the
Yes.
product, we can show you how much buying and reselling of a panelist happens,
Right.
what you think is a like panel blend, that's a fallacy. What we care about is that we can lock out respondents for the period of the survey that we want to be running and
Mm.
that they're unique and they are who they say they are where they like intend to be for the survey representation. But even that, right? Like all of those things are like measures we can take. Ultimately, is it predictive? So if you
Mm.
look at like we track 5,000 brands in those 43 countries, we
Right.
benchmark all the publicly traded brands and all the metrics we track against
Okay.
their SEC reportable financial results. So you can see, for instance, like it's the number one predictor of Samsung's revenue. Like these ability to go beyond like, hey, these are our quality measures, or even these are kind of like underlying descriptive statistics to know, listen, at the end of the day, the insights function has to be able to walk into the CFO's
Yep.
office with credibility. And that's the currency that matters. Is this predictive of financial outcomes? That's obviously then why the hedge funds became so interested in what we're doing was they could take this underlying survey data that's tracking brands or the consumer health of an economy, and they could then actually trade on that data. And that's just a different level of
Yeah.
accountability. I think
Yeah.
that's exciting is connecting opinion
That's
data operational data and really be able to validate it.
well, and that's the true measure of ROI, right? In terms
Right.
of your qualities.
Makes it a lot easier to
Yes.
renew programs, expand programs if it's connected to business results.
Correct. Yeah. So let me back up here. Sample blend.
Yeah,
Um, let's break it
totally.
down for the listener because
Sure.
I saw the chart. I understand
Yeah.
what you're saying, but let's break it down a little further. Exactly what
Okay.
you mean. Okay.
Yeah, so if you think about the universe of survey research, obviously
Yes.
there are panel companies that go out and recruit people to take surveys from time to time. They all take different incentive approaches. I think the dirty secret of the industry now, going on 10 plus years, is how much buying and
And
reselling of a panel
reselling's
happens
happening. Yep.
in a panel or on an exchange.
Right.
I think, from our standpoint, we really obviously value panel companies going out and we don't own a panel. We're
Right.
the most largest end buyer of
Yeah.
panels. So for us, it's how do we give really valuable information to the panel company to better operate and
Mhm.
obviously have confidence in the economic outcome.
Mhm.
But the reality is that for a long time, nobody wanted to sort of get their hands dirty and start to understand where the quality issues started from.
Mm.
That's where, like, I think the joke was when the most recent sort of like panel fraud issues emerges. Like, we probably throw out more panel fraud on a weekly basis
Yeah.
than anyone does in like a month. And I think
Right.
from our standpoint, that's just, it's our responsibility to own quality. And I think I want more corporate market
Yep.
research leaders thinking about this. Like, you got to learn the supply chain. It can't be
Yeah.
like, oh, trust me, I know that panel sent out
Right.
a great
Right.
press release about how they care about quality. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
that
it's
makes
not just on
sense.
the panels, that's what I mean, is like, it's hard, they're trying to run a business. It's
Right.
kind of, from our standpoint, quality's paramount. I think what we recognize that you just have to own the outcome, and
Mhm.
the way to measure that is against business outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, sample blending, obviously, you let's say for a tracker, like you want some consistency across the mix of sample, but the reality is because people are buying and selling, are you truly getting unique sample, which I think is the rise of all these deduplication platforms, right? To really just say, forget the brand of panel. I just want to make sure my person is unique in
Yeah.
this survey, and they're not they're not taking the survey six times just because they're coming in from a different brand.
Yeah, I think the reality is that it's more nuanced than what everyone
Yeah,
wants to believe it is,
yeah,
and I think that means that you actually have to take the time to understand it. I will say, and I think this is where the industry's gotten it wrong, is that this idea or obsession about synthetic data is actually just obfuscating the underlying problem. You have to have real people that have real responses, and you need to continue to refresh that. Like, the number of times I see, like, the synthetic data argument where it's like, half of your synthetic audience is actually still believing Joe Biden's president, there aren't tariffs. So, like, how could they possibly understand, like, what the
yeah,
current dynamic is? I don't care how many times you recurse it.
yeah,
There's some really valuable synthetic data applications, and we're really focused in areas like imputation that allow you to
sure.
block the synthetic or the syndicated data set we have with custom applications.
Mhm,
And that's going to unlock so much value for customers. You'll take the like full economic data set, crosswalk it in a customer application.
mhm,
But the reality is that, like, garbage in, garbage out. You got to be focused on the input quality of it. And I
mhm.
don't care what AI application you try to do or recurse on. If you have underwhelming data quality coming in, you're going to have underwhelming data analysis coming out.
So, to be clear, like you believe you need to talk to real people, and you can't necessarily duplicate or create synthetic data to represent thoughts and opinions of consumers.
I think the synthetic data argument right now really lacks a foundational basis to what you're going to create synthetic audiences off of. My point
Fair.
is that, like, if you want to do really high quality, innovative work in synthetic data, you have to start with an incredible high quality, large, continuously refreshed data set.
Yep.
And so I
Yep.
think we're really excited about synthetic data applications. But I think this is the like issue for the industry is like, let's be honest about what it takes to do really high
Yeah.
level compelling, whether it's synthetic data or AI applications.
Yes.
If I see another rapper on a Chat GPT like interview piece, I think my mind's gonna explode. Because if you want to talk about real innovation, it's
Yeah.
doing things that aren't off the shelf. It's
Right.
really beyond. I think that, for us from an AI standpoint, what we were focused on was leveraging large numerical data sets.
Right.
So the other thing the industry needs to better understand is this difference between large language sets, which is
Right.
what's driving most of the LLM applications that are kind of the qual insight piece, which
Yeah.
is interesting. It's compelling. Just it feels like there's like 17 VC backed like efforts in
Yes.
it, all built on either Claude or on OpenAI. I think
Mhm.
what our obsession was about, okay, we've done 80 million interviews. There's petabytes of existing data. What is a travesty is that it's too difficult to access that full data set. So
Mm.
how do you open it up? And so this idea of large language data sets is problematic because most of the world's language has already been consumed by OpenAI, by Anthropic. It's going to be undifferentiated. It's
Right.
going to what matters is proprietary data and what you can do for unique applications, either by sector, by category, by function. And so our obsession for Morning Consult AI was we're going to take a highly structured data set. We're going to open up through what's called retrieval augmented generation.
Mhm.
It's going to let anyone write a plain English or any language question. It's going to transform into a JSON query and then you're gonna be able to access any of those 5,000 brands, any of those economic indicators, any of those geopolitical risk indicators. You're not gonna have to know how to program in SQL. You're not gonna have to know all of the analytical pieces. So I think the industry is about to go through this huge democratization. So it's
Yeah.
both opportunity and a threat. Like
Yeah.
it's going to mean that less sophisticated operators are going to be able to access insights, but it also means that sophisticated operators are going to need to really be able to thoughtfully think about the types of protections. So like the reg architecture allows it to prevent from hallucinating. Like it
Right.
will turn data to a question if there's not an actual question or data set related to that question.
Yep, yep. So it's almost as if the insights or whatever chief data officer has to really ensure that they understand the methodology. That's what's fueling any kind of AI solution, particularly the one that you guys have done based on all this data that you have. To then release it to the broader organization because it's kind of validated by a person who understands exactly what you've been talking about.
But they should come running to solve that problem. I
Yes.
think too often everyone sits in this gatekeeper position.
Right.
And that means that you're gonna have less and less influence day by day in
Yeah.
these. And that's my fear for the insights industry is that it's not racing to be a champion. It's allowed
Or
itself to become too siloed. There are
yeah.
data analytics teams, there are other functions and strategy or finance or elsewhere that are usurping the role and influence of insights and the organization. I
Yep.
think the industry should embrace change. I think they should be running at the opportunity of, hey, this is what the business problem is. So we're gonna work on solving that business problem. Here's a couple ideas. Here's a couple things to maybe watch out for.
Yeah.
Think it should be much more progressive in terms of leaning into, and that was our view of like, we're just gonna open up morning consult AI for free.
Yeah.
Like, our
Yeah.
realization was like, it was so efficient in architecture. Now, granted, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars collecting all the data, so it
Right.
cost something, but the actual compute cost of being able to retrieve the data is incredibly efficient. And so, if you went to morning consult AI, like our view is whether you work in strategy or marketing or communications, any of those functional areas, let's just start to open up the idea of what you could ask about. Because I think that's the other issue is like people have been so hamstrung by either the cost or the time it takes to collect the
Right.
data that they don't think to use insights when it's entirely possible today to be able to collect that data in a timely period to make a decision or to collect enough of the data, you like subpopulations by city or by
Yep.
certain all those things are opening up. So it should be this
Yeah.
really exciting time in the industry. And I feel like we're hand wringing half the time about like, ah, there's some bad panel actor. Like,
Right.
let's think about how we're gonna go attack and
Go
transform a
solve a
$150 billion
problem.
industry. Let's stop like wringing our hands over like a $10 million bad actor.
Yeah. So, morning consult AI, I love the fact that you're letting people go in and try it regardless of where you are in the industry. What's the feedback been thus far?
It's been it's been incredible. So my favorite is that like you have this educational lift. So it's the onus is on us. Is it's been this diverse set of questions that come in. One of the things we looked at was like if we open up for free in a
Right.
beta, you get this incredible feedback loop.
Yeah.
And so you get these highly technical insights professionals that want to go deep on a particular thing. And obviously we have a development team that's working on that depth. But
Right.
then you still have, I think, the challenge of somebody off the street that maybe isn't familiar with insights and also is used to a world in which they just go to ChatGPT and they can ask about anything.
Right.
And the reality is you have to be able to cover that pretty wide gamut of highly technical
Technical. Yeah.
somebody who's, maybe it's an analyst
Mhm.
at McKinsey, Bain, BCG, it's working on a diligence project for private equity, and they just need a market sizing
Mhm.
question. And so I think for us, the beta has been incredibly valuable in terms of
Mhm.
learning just the diversity of use cases. And that's where, like, the number one thing I ask folks when they're in the beta is like, make sure you use that thumb up, thumb down arrow. Like every one of those cases gets investigated by the AI team. And I think from our
Right.
standpoint, that's what's so exciting is you're just seeing a proliferation of use cases. And I think we weren't sure, like, would this only be interesting to insights professionals? And what we're
Yeah.
seeing is the number of chief strategy officers, number my favorite is actually the number of C-suite professionals that I think are scared to put a question in writing to, like, maybe it's like
To
a junior
somebody
middle
else?
or like, yeah,
Yeah.
they're not gonna send the email to like the insights team because they don't want them to know they maybe don't know the answer to the question.
Right.
Or it just feels like one of those things where like, I should know this, and so I'm afraid to like, let
Ask the
send
question.
things away. So we've just seen all of these really executive titles coming in on their own and asking questions. And that's been hugely instructive then of where we make investments on agents. So for us, that was like the AI engine underneath.
Got
Now
it.
it's like, how do you take a particular function in a company or a
Yep.
particular sector, let's say it's like working with equity research. So like all the
Mhm.
major equity research banks now have access to the platform and they'll go on to an earnings call and they'll be asking a CEO, a CFO about the state of the brand or the state of the category. And so for us, it's sort of recognizing each function, each sector is going to
Right.
have a slightly different use case. And so I think the agent aspect of it gets really exciting because now you build function or sector specific agents, but you're still using the underlying infrastructure.
Very exciting. And do you feel like when you think about the different functions in the organization, um, are you covering, like, 50% of those functions? Are you covering 75% of those functions in terms of people who access, Morning Consult AI?
Oh
Which
yeah. It's
yeah?
I mean, so you look at it from like HR, you see a huge
Yeah.
cohort of users looking at like employer brand, especially in this arms race for kind of, you know, what is that 22-year-old graduating from an
Yes.
elite university want to pursue. You see it from my favorite use case right now that I just am really excited about because I think it shows the power for the insights industry
Sure.
is how finance is using it. So if you look at if you're a publicly traded company today, you have to issue guidance to public markets.
Right.
Most publicly traded companies, especially that are consumer oriented, have been pulling guidance because it's
Okay.
difficult with the uncertainty of the tariff dynamic,
Right.
some of the sort of questions around customer health. Well, if you're a CEO or you're a CFO or head of investor relations, you still need to be able to come to that earnings call prepared to talk about the
Prepared.
past quarter and the
Right.
next. And I think what we found all of a sudden, we saw it first on the sell side equity research piece, where like a Goldman Sachs or a Jefferies or JP Morgan Chase, they're
Right.
going to take the data or Morgan Stanley. And I think what we noticed was all of a sudden on the flip side was corporate teams wanted to have more involvement from insights in their earnings prep pack. And so it's been really exciting because now all of a sudden, take for instance, this is public, so I can talk about is the Home Depot CEO on the earnings call a couple weeks ago is leading with a particular frame of here's the customer health of the Home Depot customer. Not
Wow.
like here's the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index of 600
Right.
across the country. No, here's specifically, for any of those brands, we're doing like 75,000 interviews, but we're asking your customers, how do they describe their personal financial conditions? Do you think now is a good time to make a major purchase? And then
Yeah.
you could cut it by like higher income or you could cut it by
Yep.
like homeowners. And so I think what we're starting to see is this opportunity for insights to be much more influential in financial markets, whether it's on the side of supporting corporate executives or if
Mhm.
it's supporting kind of equity research and buy side hedge funds.
Very cool. When you think about the insights industry, we talked a little bit about, you'd like to see more people forward looking versus or running towards solving a problem versus kind of reacting. What other kind of trends or forecasts do you see happening in the insights industry as it relates to AI or anything for that matter? Like what's your thesis on this, relatively large industry that seems to be struggling a bit?
I, I think if I look at it at its core, it's a cultural change. So
Okay.
I think this is the hardest challenge. When we tripled during the pandemic, yeah, I think we
Yeah.
felt this urge, like we had to go recruit out of like the legacy firms. And
Yes.
there were some incredible people that came in the organization. But I think we underappreciated how much we had to sort of change the cultural
Yeah.
DNA. And, what got us out of the gate was that, it was a high intensity, high accountability, to do 100% growth rates. Like
Yeah.
it's not operating at like GDP plus like growth. And so
Right.
I think that's the issue for the industry to change is like
Yeah.
the way in which you worked for even the last 2 years is going to look totally different the next 2 years. And I think we grew up as an organization realizing like we need to be super upfront in like our interview process
Right.
that this is who we are. I think
Yeah.
we kind of looked at, the areas where we could have gotten better is even if somebody's awesome and they're terrific and they're so smart and they have this, if they're not going to fit the cultural DNA of the
Mm.
organization, it's not going to drive the alignment that's going to drive customer value. And so I
Growth.
think
Yeah.
from our standpoint, what we started to understand was we're gonna focus on integrating AI across the entire business. Like
Yep.
the obsession we had about the efficiency gains in supply chain,
Yeah.
those are gonna flow through to client delivery. And I think that's the part for the industry. It's not unique to us. Is like the way in which a client deliverable is generated today
Yeah.
is gonna look totally different 6, 12, 18 months from now. And the issue with each one of the AI model updates is you don't know when that inflection moment's gonna hit. So I think
Yes.
organization, we're trying to focus on, okay, what's the end state? Like,
Yep.
this is the perfect, like, you should be able to leverage a GPT to generate a really strong first draft of a questionnaire, which you still have that expertise, the human expertise involved in it. But you're maybe not spending all that time then programming the survey, or you're maybe not spending all that time doing open end fraud analysis. Like
Mhm.
those are things AI are really well equipped to do. And
Yeah.
so the challenge is going to be for the industry. Are you okay letting go with the way that it's operated? I think
Right.
that's pretty scary. And especially for some of the large organizations, like they don't have the technical talent to do that implementation. And they're not going to be in a position in which I think they really see the overnight success
Mm.
of you're willing to commit to training the user base or user base being your employees and the customer
Yeah.
base.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, uh, t I know that, when we spoke earlier, you talked about the shift to focusing on culture, right? In terms of making it a bigger priority. What were some of the key principles that you said this or key values that define your culture to really be able to support that hyper growth that you guys have experienced?
Yeah, I think from our standpoint, what we were really worried about as we kind of reflect on, okay, the first 5 years versus the second
Yeah.
5 years was that as you get bigger, you recognize you need to bring in more experience. But there was something about those first 5 years where, we came out of nowhere. What
Right.
that made that possible? Like, yes, there was like some huge technical breakthroughs that we were able to
Sure.
pioneer. This kind of scale of data operations compounded and the pricing advantages we got compounded. But I think when we reflect on it, like what made it possible was like we were obsessed about the mission and we ate, slept, dreamed how you're gonna go work on those pieces.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you marry that with recognizing, like, okay, you gotta bring in the right levels of experience to reach the next level and to
Sure.
be able to scale the org, and, how you do that globally is different than how you do that, you know,
Mhm.
out of one office in one city at one time. So it's how do you marry those 2 things? And I think it's a little bit of a pendulum that you're trying to balance between bringing in outside perspective, but maintaining the intensity of the culture and sort of this commitment to the customer value proposition, which we think
Yeah.
are really like speed, quality, and cost. And so I think from our standpoint, we would probably too often kind of squint at it and say, "Oh, I could see how this would work out." And I think now we're looking at it saying, we got to be really upfront in
Yep.
the interview process. There is really, this is who we are. It's not for
Right.
everyone. Fully
Yeah.
understandable. Like we're a little crazy sometimes.
Yes.
Good, crazy, bad. Depends on
Right.
your persuasion. But I think from our standpoint, like that was just different. And I
Mm.
think that's sort of the growing up moment when you're going through a high growth startup is you got to be honest about who you are. And I think you got to stay committed to the mission. I think that was sort of our, at the 10-year mark, that was sort of the redoubling is like, we're here to solve what we think is a really consequential problem for society, for businesses,
Right.
for governments and financial markets.
Yeah. And you need those
Yeah,
intense
you
people.
can't re you ca no, and I think it's something for founders is, like, nobody's gonna care as much as you do.
Yeah.
But a whole lot better when you have a lot of missionaries than a lot of mercenaries.
That's so true. That's so true.
There's just an element of, like, alignment and excitement around, "Hey, this is gonna be incredible. I can't wait to share this with the client. I
Right.
can't wait to see this come to fruition."
I always find, like, as founders, like, you wake up and you have an idea and you walk into the room and you want the people in the room to be excited to hear your idea versus like, "Holy shit, what's the new idea today?" Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, and
it's
even more, it's like, I want you to be excited to bring your best ideas
bring
'cause
your best
that
idea
that knows,
exactly.
like, Kyle and I was
Fair
there's so
enough.
many ideas that
Yeah.
came Lori, it's just like, I
There's
just want you all committed to this mission. I think we
yes.
talk about it as sort of like it's a journey. There's
Yeah.
ups, there's downs, but, like, you
We're
really
all
gotta
together
who
doing
you're
yeah.
on the journey with.
I love it. I love that. Um, let's switch gears a little bit, Michael. We've talked about obviously entrepreneurship, you being a co-founder and CEO of the company, but as you think about young professionals entering the industry, what advice would you give them as they think about as they're embarking on their career within the space?
So I think the 2 things that stand out to me, and we reflect a lot about sort of
Yeah.
earlier career hiring. One is like your commitment to learning and evolving. Like it's not like I finished school, so therefore I'm done learning.
Right.
Uh, I think that's going to be paramount, obviously, in an AI, accelerated society. Like you're going to have to continue to evolve. And so it's
Yep.
that like intellectual curiosity can't replace that. And I
Mhm.
think that's something that atrophies really quickly.
Mhm.
So, early career, like it's not what you're given in your assignment at work that's gonna be
Yeah.
really exciting. Like one of the things we're excited about with the implementation of our internal AI platform is that it encourages every employee to be able to go and build GPTs. Like if there's
Nice.
a part of your job that you
Yeah.
hate, like great, like
Go
take a
figure it
night,
out.
take a
Yeah.
weekend, go work on it. Like
Yeah.
we have a monthly award for you know, any employee that generates something that we think is compelling and exciting and demonstrates sort of that intellectual curiosity. It doesn't have to be in your like sector. Like we have some
Right.
folks that, hey, there's an entire element of our business that does analysis on like
Yeah.
big geopolitical topics or economic topics. Like, how could I take that, build a GPT for our sales team to come up with innovative content that would secure a meeting with a potential client? Like, that came
Love
from
that.
somebody not in any of those divisions, and so I
Right.
think from our standpoint, like, it's that intellectual curiosity. Obviously, there's an element of AI. The other is, like, frankly, like, I think it's hard because I know in my own career, like, early out of like, I probably would not have taken this advice, maybe it breaks through somebody else.
Yeah.
Uh, it's being willing to wait a little bit longer at an organization if you feel like you're really building a strong connection, especially with
Yep.
executive leaders. I think when I look back on it, there's too often the case. It's not so much you have to wait longer, but have a more open dialogue. Like there's a
Mhm.
couple situations where I think for folks, like given what their career goals were, they weren't going to necessarily spend their life at morning consult.
Right.
And I do think that like if they had had a relationship at an executive level or been open about it, is like, wow, I would have picked up the phone and called so and so, or Kyle
Yeah.
would have made the introduction here or there. And I think that element of it early in your career, you're sort of afraid to have some pretty honest and vulnerable conversations with executives. And if you're there kind of 2 or 3 years, like it doesn't happen in like month 9 or 12,
Correct. Yeah.
but if you're at year 3 or
You've
4,
built some
where you're
equity
thinking
and
about
trust.
grad
Yeah.
school, other like career changes, like people want you to be successful.
Yes.
You also have to, I think, be able to give them the opportunity to be helpful. And so I
Yeah.
think that's the thing early in your career is like both being willing to stick along and kind of reap the better. Like, because the folks that I think I've seen do that, all of a sudden there's these like incredible takeoff moments, like year
Yeah.
3, 5 in a career
Yeah.
that like are really set up by doing a lot of the hard work and putting in the time in year 1 or 2.
It's so true. And it's about being confident and being able to have that dialogue, right? And not make it's a human to human conversation.
Yeah, it doesn't mean like the executive that you're working with isn't gonna like think less of you if you like acknowledge
Correct.
like I don't like doing this or I don't like.
Yeah.
I think it's not like, "Hey, I'm coming in to dictate, like, this is what I wanted."
Right.
It's more just like, "This is what I'm learning about myself," and
Yeah.
I think then also being able to ask questions like, the other thing too is I think asking, like, life questions among executives is something that, like, I feel like is always beneficial for folks
Yeah.
or 'cause you start to realize you're gonna make choices. Like, I live in
Right.
Chicago now. We're headquartered in DC. Like, I
Yeah.
knew, for our family, we wanna be we have a Chicago office, and it was sort of that piece to it, but, like, I probably wouldn't have felt comfortable about making that change if early in my career, I hadn't known executives that sort of tried to create that type of balance.
Yeah. Yep. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. I really
Hey,
enjoyed
for
our
having me.
conversation, and I can't wait to see what's next for a morning consult.
Thank you.
All
Have a
right.
great day.
Take care. Thank you.